All right, we're back on our Federal Friday, third edition. Having a lot of fun with Jack and Joe, and just to get the audience back up, if you're just tuning in to this show, Jack Riley is to my left, and Jack was the former deputy administrator of DEA, which would be the second in charge, correct, Jack?
That's it, yeah.
And Joe is a retired ASAC from DEA who worked in many special assignments, including what's the SOC you worked at?
Yeah, we worked in SOCs. Syntac, I worked in the Special Operations Division my last couple years out in D.C., right. Last 7.
But I really wanted to go over that because we're going to get into some insight this week into the election that happened a couple weeks ago and some of the nominees that are out there that these guys have some really good insight of why they might have been picked, some good theories, and they've both been through a couple elections at the federal level in Washington, D.C., and can give some really good insight on some of the changes that are coming and how that's going to trickle down. And Joe is very excited. He put together numbers. Joe's like numbers, kind of like he likes rocks. So he put together some interesting numbers on the election. Hit us with some numbers, Joe.
Well, I've already been told to keep it down. So anybody that likes science knows that nobody else likes science. So, I just put some numbers together. I would like you guys to say maybe, hey, what about this? But
we might.
Everybody knows the electoral votes, right? So Trump 312, Harris 226. The popular vote, I think, is really important because the popular vote's gone way up since COVID. It's gone up 15, 18 million votes. It's pretty interesting. So this year, Trump 75 million-ish, Harris 72 million-ish, not too bad. But let's put it in perspective. I think that's important. And then maybe since we're talking about consequences in elections, maybe we can say why these numbers have gone up and some dastardly things that one of the political parties might have done or perpetrated back in the day. So, and these are Democratic numbers because they're the most exciting.
Okay.
The Republicans are kind of boring on the numbers. And in full disclosure, I lean a little bit to the right, but I'm kind of in the middle, so just in case. Okay. So Kerry in 2004, 59 million. Bama in his first term, 69.5 million. Second term, 65.9 million. Clinton 2016.
Did you just call him Obama?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Okay.
Obama.
I just making sure.
Is he from Alabama?
Getting some Alabama stats?
Obama, yeah. So a little play. I call him Bama sometimes.
You're tight with him. Okay, go ahead.
We met each other a couple times.
You and Bam Bam.
So Clinton, just keeping in perspective, she didn't win, 65.9. Listen to this. 2020, Joe Biden. Take a guess. 81.3 million votes.
Yeah, those numbers have been out there in social media for a while, and everybody's wondering.
So, quick little anecdotal story about that, and then Harris in 2024, we already talked about that. So, one of the brilliance of campaigns is everyone always talks about if there's a crisis, you make it or you turn it into something that benefits you, right? One of the things they did during COVID is Democrats realized that the Republicans have never been good at mail-in ballots or ballot harvesting. Never. They're just not good at it. They just don't do it. And back in the day when this was going on, Trump made a fatal error and didn't play along with those type of new things that they put in place due to COVID. The Democrats nailed it, and they won the election. There's many other factors, but I think that is a huge thing, and that transition into those numbers up. But what did the Trump campaign do this year? Laura Trump, mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, pre-vote, they nailed it. They killed it. It would have been interesting to see what they did in 2016 if they would have done it back then. Or 2020, I apologize. It would have been very interesting. So those are some of the ones. The other big thing, and we'll get off the numbers, the states flipped.
Yeah.
Monumental. 7 states were flipped, blue to red. 7. That's huge. That's massive. Just so happens all 7 were swing states, but that was pretty good. Even if it's just by 1% or 2% of the vote or whatever it is, and there's a lot of pundits out there looking into the dynamics of why they flipped and the rise in red votes in some very deep states or deep blue counties. that was very interesting, but we won't get into that. 7, the Democrats didn't flip any, not one state.
We didn't flip a county.
No, they had a bad message. But let's talk for a quick second before we go into this. Let's talk about why.
I didn't
we
even know
think-
they had a message.
Yeah, it was. It was joy.
See, here we go.
Yeah,
Here we go.
It was joy.
Everybody just be happy.
What about podcasts? That helped Trump out, right?
Joe Rogan. There's a whole. The left hates Joe Rogan. right now.
Next election, we might be the podcast to come on.
I think so.
Come
Let
on
me
now.
ask you a question. How much did the Trump campaign pay Joe Rogan to be on his podcast?
Oh, that's a whole nother issue. That the finances, right?
0. He paid 0.
Right.
He went there for 3 hours. He paid 0. Anybody have a clue how much the Democrats paid for Beyonce and
I believe they're being reported as 20 million.
20 million? Now we don't know if it went directly to Beyonce and then Oprah Studios got a million plus. Why couldn't they do it for free? Why couldn't they just do it in support of their candidate?
Like producer John.
Like producer John. I agree.
exactly right.
So I thought that
He
was.
could have done it. If we could get him $1 million on the next election cycle, I think he'd be happy.
I would be happy.
Let's shoot for that.
So I
a
think
million pesos? You're good, Jim.
that's not too much cash.
Yeah.
So I think what's really going to take us into the next part of where we're going with all this type of stuff is what were some of the issues that Trump ran on that he is picking his picks to put in those type of views of his.
Right. And we'll get into the federal, law enforcement aspect of it
Absolutely.
through some of the federal law enforcement agencies. But we talked before we started rolling, and Jack and Joe had some great insight on some of the nominees and why they might have been nominated. And a lot of it has to do with the post-2016 election, which a lot of things, all over the news, the Russian dossier, and how that filtered down into many other things, and how a lot of these nominees that are coming up were very integral in those in that 2016 ruckus, we'll call it. So go ahead and
Well, I think-
your
I think
favorite one was
Jack-
Kash Patel. Let's
Yeah, but
start there.
Can we before we get to Cash Patel?
Okay.
Jack and I wanted to talk about the buzz in Washington D.C.
Oh,
during
yeah,
these
yeah.
elections.
We'll get
I
to that
think-
first.
So I'll talk a little bit about it, and then Jack was in the higher ups. I was with the boots on the ground type people.
Right.
But I do have to say there's a dark contrast between Obama's election and inauguration and Trump's first election inauguration. It was completely, unequivocally the flip of a coin.
And you guys were in D.C. Both of
were.
you guys were in D.C. at the
We
time
were.
of both of those.
So the first thing I'll bring up for me is I'm a junkie. I love news. I love statistics. I love politics
And rocks.
and rocks. I try to stay out of politics or the politics of rocks. But one of the things during Obama's campaign and during his election cycle, D.C. was a buzz of bar activity and nightlife and all kinds of staffers and rich men's kids that are going to Georgetown and all that, buying drinks in bars. And it was really interesting. And you got a lot of perspective from a lot of different things at my level. Boy, during Trump's, it was the complete opposite. There was fighting in the bars. There was arguments. You couldn't get a point across. If you said something.
Unless you went to the Trump Hotel. Then everybody was smoking cigars
You
and
got
life was
it.
good.
And then, unfortunately, it looked like a movie set for To Live and Die in L.A. Remember that movie where you
Right.
got to escape from New York or L.A.? There were huge trucks that were blocking all the intersections, and it got dark, and they were getting people out of there, and they were setting fires all over the place. It was different.
Yeah.
You knew it was almost foreshadowing of what the next 4 years were going to be like on day one.
It
of
was
his
it
inauguration.
was a different time
sad.
then. It was people were very upset about this.
very, very upset.
And not so much this time. I mean, there are people out there that are, they always play those clips of the nutballs. And Jack, what you were saying when you were
I think Washington in general, and a lot of people, I hope they're interested in it, it is, we hear the word Beltway, it literally is a separate country. And it becomes even more isolated during election time because the residents in D.C., virtually everybody is connected to the federal government at some point. A lot of them are getting paid because they work. But their understanding of what is happening at the presidential level and then the cabinet level is far better than anybody that lives in Kansas or Missouri.
They know consequences are coming.
They know the consequences, and they know it's going to come quick. And I think that's one of the things that I really admire about Trump is I think he went to school on the first one. I don't think he thought he was going to win the election.
Right.
And I think afterwards he did what every other president had done before him. Listen to the existing bureaucrats, whether they be in the Defense Department, the Justice Department, and move at that speed. Where I think this time he realized, being the nominee of the party, 3 years ago, really, that he was going to come in guns loaded, ready to go to work. And I think this is the most important and interesting time we're living through right now because you're beginning to see him do exactly what he said he was going to do. Right. What drives me nuts with the left is they're acting shocked. And I say this to my wife all the time, who lives on the left. He told you exactly what he was going to do.
Right.
And if you listened, he told you repeatedly what he was going to do. And guess what? He won.
He did.
So now he's doing what he said he told you he would do. And the feeling in Washington now is like it's a volcano. Like, where did this come from? Where did Kash Patel come from? Where did these other nominees come from? Wake up.
When you were there at the level that you were at inside the DEA, did you feel that you had to dance around landmines, or you had to watch what you said? You had to be anti-political?
During the last couple months leading up to the election, when Obama was getting ready to leave, pretty much the Department of Justice at that point was being run by some people that, didn't ever see the sun. They didn't want anything to do with anything. So they were pretty much, hey, you got to slow down what you're doing. And me in particular, slow down what you're doing. We don't want you in the media. We don't want you talking about anything that might be controversial, the Mexican cartels, all of those things. So there was a break, and they made it very clear, we don't want you doing that. I watched the talking heads in the afternoon on the news, and I got to turn it off.
Yeah.
You're acting like this is a revelation that, stop it. Now it's reality, so let's deal with it.
People get mad at me sometimes when they're like, stop kissing Riley's ass. And they don't realize that we're friends.
Right.
But I have to pay him a compliment because in my tenure with Jack, going through this political transition on the red or the blue, he never compromised his values about what DEA should be doing.
Absolutely.
And what our mission focus was and keeping us all safe. He wasn't a waverer. He wasn't one of those guys, oh my God, I can't do that operation because I might not become confirmed in the next. He never did that.
And I'll do a little anecdotal story here is we had Joe Moquan. And Joe Moquan was the chief.
And by the way, another plug for the show. First of all, Joe and I,
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I love the guy. We had a great relationship. But it was so great to see him with you guys, talking to cops directly,
right,
and explaining some of the stuff that he went through that no one knew about.
Right.
That's what's great about this podcast.
I love it. And then to get to your point, or get to where I was going with you, is that I think leaders that you don't talk about, when we sit around a bar, you never talk about the part about being in D.C. much, because you really didn't enjoy it all. I mean, I get it. It's a nice, it's nice to be promoted, and but you always want to go back to the days where you were running and gunning and having fun.
Yeah.
But you realize that good leaders are necessary. And I just wanted to throw that in while I had it on my mind.
And Moqua is a prime example, and I learned a whole lot from him. Here's the way I look at stuff, and we can get into this a little bit later. Joe is going to ask me about some things that have occurred with the DEA administrator's job in the last couple of days in which I've been involved in. But here's my take on this. Every federal agency has got competent managers. Oh, believe me, at every level. But they don't have leaders.
No.
They don't have people with vision that are willing to push. And that, I think, is one of the things that I pride myself in, and it got me into trouble. Yeah. Because I rubbed some people wrong, right, especially ones that were above me. But I tell you, that's the key to law enforcement, because it's all about trying to make the community safe, and sometimes you can't do it. You got to stand up and say, no, we're not doing it. It's not working. This is wrong. So it's hard.
I think when you're in the Beltway, as we call it, so if you don't know, there's a road that goes around D.C. It's called the 495, and then there's the 395 as well. So there's an inner loop and an outer loop, and that is the Beltway, and that is where everything happens in the world, in the greatest country in the world. It's the Roman Empire of our country. So when you're in that, and they talk about the swamp all the time, if you're at Jack's level, you've got two choices to make. You hold true to yourself and to your crew.
I think that's
or
important. It's really important.
You worry about your next promotion and where you're going, and you're part of the swamp.
Right.
You're part of that indoctrination, and you remove yourself further and further and further from why you did this.
So one of the things Trump has said he's going to do is and spread it out. So he doesn't want all those agencies' headquarters to be in D.C. He wants to move them throughout the country. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea, and it was a proponent. It was one of the things I pushed. At the end of my time, our lease was up in this crappy building they had us in for the last 15 years. And I told the Department of Justice, Sally Yates was the Deputy Attorney General, who, by the way, didn't like me. I told her I think we should be headquartered in Kansas, in the middle of the country, so that everyone from the West Coast to the East Coast to the southern border had access to headquarters that could play another role. Because as the agent in charge of El Paso, I would get brought into Washington. It'd take me 2 days to get there. I'd get brought in for a 35-minute meeting. And for what are we doing? So you have no access. It's so decentralized the way it is in Washington, and that's a bad thing for law enforcement, especially in a job like DEA or the FBI, where there's actually offices all over the world. It's a bad thing, and I applaud him on that. I think that should have been done a long time ago, and I think right now it's the time to do it with the FBI.
Well, I think so.
I think there should be regional headquarters responsible for a region across the country, and they could report to the political.
to one person in the
Yes.
office rather than the 7,000 people that are hanging out there.
Right.
But yeah, let's just and we're going to get in. Let's get into these nominees. All right, let's go to what you guys know best. And this just came out yesterday. They had a nominee for the head of DEA. He has withdrawn his name. Joe, what can you tell us on that?
Well, his name's Chad Cronister. He's sheriff down in Florida. Excuse me. We're sure he's connected to the new attorney general. I'm sure he's a big Trump fan. But I think what's more important with him is why did they pick a sheriff? You know, obviously he's backed out. You can read about why he backed out. But why did they pick a sheriff? And I have an opinion here, and then I'm gonna ask Jack. My opinion is they picked a sheriff because Trump's got an agenda about taking DEA agents and putting them to work. And putting them to work on a lot of these cases, working with local law enforcement, going after some of these illegals, going after the drug trade in the United States, going after the border, and maybe even kind of getting rid of a little bit of the foreign footprint. You know, not the major countries but, you know, we have 3 offices in Brazil. Some things like that. So I think that's why I picked it. And then Jack and I were talking on the way here, and I was curious, has the transition team ever came out to you and talked to you about possibly even doing something with the DEA? But remember, we talked on this show about your domestic cartel program, which fits this agenda immediately.
Yeah, it's funny. Over the last couple of days, I've been fairly busy dealing with this issue, and one of the things that I brought up to the transition team was the domestic cartel program that I tried to initiate at DEA, along with some other really bright people, and they wanted to know why it was stopped. And essentially, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I told them because these people in charge really felt that it wasn't what Congress wanted to hear, and that they wanted everything to be foreign in terms of our movements with our people, with our resources. And of course, my part was, yeah, they're foreign, but they're in virtually every corner of this country. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist, because this is where they operate, this is where they make money, this is where they kill people. And of course, that was, no, let's stick to our mission. Our mission is to go after the biggest and baddest wherever they are. So it was a tough thing. But
Real quick, Jack,
it also isolated DEA agents who I think have the best relationship with state and locals, and I've said this many times. It isolated us. It broke that bond to a certain extent in places where we had that bond. And quite frankly, that was one of the things that really pissed me off about the last administration.
Real quick, your domestic cartel program,
Essentially, it started with a testimony in Congress where I showed the members of the committee, here's the connect between your city and Sinaloa, for instance.
Any cartel. You just name the cartel, and you could connect the dots.
And whether it was through a street gang that was distributing, collecting the money, or killing, or it was a direct cartel hit that we took a load of dope or money or guns off, or we had interceptions from an ongoing wire that dealt with that particular district. Those would become the domestic cartel targets. And they would be worked in conjunction with our state and local so that we would make a difference in the communities as well as gather evidence to try to do something overseas. And to me, it just was the right thing to do with our resources, and we were relying on our friends that we'd relied on for years. And at that point, it was too much. It was too much turning stuff over to the state and locals. I think what Joe's saying, and I'm excited about it, I think by this nomination, I think President Trump is saying it's about time we start taking care of our own.
I do too.
Right.
We don't need an office and I used to say this at meetings, in Bora Bora, where guys go to embassy parties and write cables. No, those guys need to be in a car in St. Louis working on bad guys here. And I'm hopeful that that's where we're headed. So,
I couldn't agree more, and I think at the end of the show we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about what we think the intentions are. But we spoke on this show about FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, fitting right in with, so we designate these cartels as FTOs. Domestic cartel program goes hand in hand with it locally, and now they can be charged as facilitators for these terrorist organizations. But to do it that way is brilliant. So if people don't know out there, DEA is a great place. Jack and I both love it with all our hearts and souls, but sometimes it gets a little disjointed. And sometimes there's no focus on certain threats like the domestic cartel initiative. And guys are just making cases all over the place, running around, and it's like the old adage about, the squirrel looking for the nut. But if we focused all that on the biggest threats that we have right now domestically, linking it to the cartels, it's brilliant. My opinion, and I talked to him about this yesterday, my opinion is that's why they brought this guy in.
But one of the things, too, that he is that everybody's got to have that vision. So if you have that program, and we'll get into some of the other nominees, that just doesn't – it's not just a DEA program. That's a program between all the DEA, the FBI, the ATF, where they all have to buy into that and work together, and then locals, too.
Yep.
You have locals in those task force. Let's just call it a task force because that's the name we know. And where that stuff has a mechanism of filtering to the people across in Mexico, to the special forces and all those.
I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that I made my point to the transition people was not only does this affect local communities, large and small and rural, but it also attacks, without intention, but it attacks illegal alien migration,
without a doubt,
which fits into the total program. Look, our law enforcement at the federal level needs to do two things, in my opinion, DEA, FBI, everybody. We need to identify the threat and be mobile enough to go meet the threat. Mm-hmm. Not to have a big office in a place. The guy that used to run the New York office reported to me, and he'd say, well, we had the most seizures. And I said, well, you should. You got the most people in the country, and you have the most agents. I'm concerned about Kansas City.
Yeah.
How is that affecting, what's the impact on the community there? Because it's just as devastating as it is in the Bronx.
Right.
And I think that mentality is what I'm hopefully seeing here.
And I think that it forces everybody to communicate and pass intelligence, because we're all working the major threats locally, domestically, regionally, and internationally. You have to communicate when those different cells come up. This guy's working it, this guy's working it, they're sharing the information through an SOD building, and it's all It's all organized.
You know, the key to any leadership is relationships.
Yeah.
It's building coalitions for a common cause. That's the bottom line. And that's exactly what we need to be doing, I think, at the
I agree.
federal level.
And I think you nailed it with what's the ancillary benefit? Well, we're going to try and get rid of all these illegals that have come in here, and they have terrible criminal histories. Well, they're going to be the first ones on the platter.
We already know
Right.
who they are.
Yeah.
Well, and they're going to be the ones that stick out to the people that are trying to make a
Right.
difference like that. And I know that the biggest anti-immigration are the anti ship all these guys, immigrants out or illegal immigrants out is the people that try to make it here. They're really trying to do the right thing. And believe me, if you're trying to do the right thing, you will not get in the targets of that because it's not just, grab a guy off the street.
No.
There's intelligence behind it. And those are the people that is, I guarantee you, that as soon as they get scooped up, they will be out of the
I
country.
mean, and this goes hand in hand with national security threat. These people are a threat. Whether they're driving a car with 50 kilos in it, whether they're pulled over by a St. Louis policeman with the pistol because they just went to stick somebody up that didn't pay him, all of those things are important. And again, guys, we got to go after the organizations.
Yeah.
You got to cut the legs off the organizations so they cease to exist. You just can't clip it. You got to hit it. And the way to do it is to build relationships and coalitions so that we have a common interest.
So I want to get back to a question, and we addressed this on the show about the borders. And Joe, I just wanted you to go over this again. What's the process of getting named a foreign terrorist organization?
Well, I think we're going to see it. I think we are going to see it in this administration.
And where does it start?
It starts with the Secretary of State and the Treasury Department. So those two agencies get together. It gets identified by law enforcement. A paper, I'm giving you a short version, a paper is written. It gets voted on by Congress. They give it like a temporary amount of time to see how it filters out, and then they can either take it off the list or increase it. Once it's designated and on that list, it can be removed. However, all those things we talked about now come into play with
Right.
Joe Busso.
Right.
You're already hearing
with the Tier
about
1 assets, which is your special forces within the military operating within the country. And that brings me to my next question. And Jack, and I'll ask you, let's just say they get named an FTO, a federal terrorist organization.
foreign.
Or foreign, I'm sorry. And the special service, do they need consent to operate in Mexico from the Mexican government?
Traditionally, at least and it's classified, but our agent population in Mexico, to get standing and work visas, which we need, we would work with the Mexicans on that number. But I can tell you, as the deputy, I moved people in and out of there. They had no idea we were there.
Okay. You think you'd see a lot of that if there was fight back from the Mexican government?
Absolutely. And I also think you'd see some pretty tough economic sanctions put on Mexico if they
It's going to be interesting.
turn the other way.
It's going to be very,
Because
very interesting.
again, it's about coalitions and leadership. Contrary to what everyone says, Mexico doesn't want this. They don't want the cartels.
Right.
They don't want the killing of the press, of mayors, of police chiefs, of innocent citizens. They want to clean it up too. So again, this is the next logical legal step that we can take, and I think it's the right thing to do.
I do too. And then the only little icing on the cake I want to put, and I want to go back to the domestic cartels, they're not separate. So when you have the FTO, all those the domestic cartels, just a name, right, and a mission set of what to do. And once you're involved in that type of law enforcement or policing, we're all working the same thing. Once that is working with a foreign terrorist organization, well, now all those special rules come down to play. And the idiot that's moving hundreds of kilos between here and Atlanta, he's helping a foreign terrorist organization. Those jail sentences are ridiculous, or could be, right?
And from a political point of view, go downstream a little bit. You don't think a prosecutor, a police chief, a mayor, a city councilman would not be totally elated to know that their local police department was working on a foreign terrorist organization?
Absolutely.
You don't think the citizens would feel genuinely appreciative to the police departments for doing this? It's a home run on every level. And it wouldn't go on forever, and it wouldn't be in every city.
I
But
think.
it's a working strategy that no one's taken the time to look at.
So when Trump got elected the first time, and I don't want to speak about Joe because Joe is our tier 1 asset representative, but with working with a lot of them, when he got elected the first time, there was a buzz in that community about doing what they were brought here to do. And
The
what they're
special
trained to
forces
do.
community?
Right. I think that buzz right now is also in law enforcement. I think law enforcement's about to get the green light
Right.
to do some of these things that they've maybe had their hands tied for the last 4 years. And they're going to mix with that unit cohesiveness. And I think there's a big buzz.
I think one of the things too is that, and we mentioned it in our last show, is if you go this route with naming these people terrorists, is that the funnel down of federal funds. And as you guys know, is that these police departments and state police, they're broke. But if there is a mission where you could filter down money, hire more officers because of it, or whatever it could be, whether it's, and again, working with federal agencies, you get some of the top-notch intelligence ever known to man. And that's a part of it too. So I think it's just a great idea.
It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's a bad time to
It'd
be
fun.
retired.
It would be fun to be part of.
I think so too. In any way.
Right.
In any way.
Absolutely.
Even as an administrator or trying to move some pieces around.
One of the things that I admire Joe Moqua from, and he said it on your show, is 99.9% of the time, cops are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Right.
They're out there trying to do the right thing, and something bad happens.
As are, and then again, we get into that, whole grouping people in. The FBI is wonderful
Absolutely.
people. Now, they take some heat every once in a while, but the FBI agents we work with locally,
They're the best.
for the most part, they're the great. I mean, they're just great guys. Yeah. Again, they got the same doofuses that the police department has, that the DEA has.
Right.
Everybody has some doofuses. They're tough to get along with, and
Same with ATF, same with IRS.
It's everybody.
I mean, there are...
Same with Boeing. I'm sure they got some doofuses up there, too.
Yeah, a couple that designed the door that blew off. But they, all of the rank and file people who want to do the job, who get up every day trying to do the right thing for their communities, have to be encouraged by what we're about to see.
Yeah.
And let's be honest. When we do aggressive policing at any level, federal, state, and local, sometimes bad things happen.
That's part of the game.
And I think people have to be ready for that.
I know.
And that means attorneys, that means police departments, federal agencies, the whole apparatus has to realize that when aggressive enforcement takes place, bad guys do bad things. And sometimes it doesn't go too well for, it goes to...
Both ways. It doesn't go too well both ways. You can lose some people involved, too.
That goes to the heart of why it's so great you guys do what you do.
Right.
Because I've always said that the time to get a relationship with the media, if you're a police executive, is not during a crisis.
Right.
It better be ongoing so that when something bad does happen, and it will happen, there is some type of accurate reporting and no hatchet going on.
Yep. So now let's get into some of these appointments, Joe. And Joe's done. We talked before the show. Joe's got a pretty interesting
theory.
No, it's not a theory. It's a timeline where a lot of these appointees and how they were involved in the government in 2016. So let's start with Kash Patel,
All right,
the nominee for the FBI.
I want to say one thing first that's really important. As you watch these nominees get picked, what is the one thing they're in our realm, right? Justice, law enforcement. What are they saying? Every one of them is saying, get out there and get to work. Every single solitary one of them. And I think that's beautiful. And maybe someday we could have this cohesiveness where we're all working on what needs to be done. And I think it starts with these appointees. So elections have consequences, that everybody says, right? I think one of the biggest consequences of this election are the picks. And if you know anything about some of these picks, they're serious people. And they're loyal to Mr. Trump. They are loyal to him. But Kash Patel was just picked by the FBI. I don't think he's going to have any trouble getting confirmed. I think they may have to, on the back end, they may have to move a chess piece, or maybe they don't get this guy or that guy. It seems like Hegseth right now is kind of on the chopping block. Maybe they offer him up so they get Patel. I don't know how this works, but maybe they have to do a little play. But what I think is really interesting about Patel is Patel was a staunch investigator into the Russian collusion. Now I'm gonna give you little bits and pieces of it, and then kind of draw it all into the end because it's been going on for a long time. And Jack and I spoke earlier before the show, and we think that some of the stuff that's about to come out from Patel and Bondi and Ratcliffe, 3 bulldogs associated with the Russian collusion, the lies about the laptop, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, all that stuff we're going to give a little overview of. They're ready to cut some heads off, and they're ready to put some political families to bed that were involved in this. So let's talk about Patel. Patel's an awesome lawyer. He was involved in Trump's early campaign. He was involved in some of the intelligence, and then he switched over to some of the investigations associated with what was going on. One of the first things that happened with Russian collusion, if you guys don't know, I'll give you a brief overview and let you decide. Maybe I'll give you my opinion or not. It starts off with this guy.
I think you already have, Joe.
It starts off with this guy, Papadopoulos, in London, sitting there drinking like we do on any day of the week. He just happens to be on Trump's advisory team for his election, his campaign. He's sitting there with a couple Australian diplomats, and they start talking about, I think Trump has some research or some information that was given to him about the Clinton campaign and their associations with Russia. And that allegedly came from a leak when not only her State Department email was hacked, because if you remember, she had her own server, which if Jack and I did that, when we were in DEA,
in leg
we'd be in
chains
prison.
right now.
We would be in prison.
We'd be breaking rocks in the prison
We
yard.
are already telling you there is a 2-tier system of justice. It is 100% true. If I had 1 second of an email I sent to him or over the classified systems that said Joe Cronin Chicago, I would be in handcuffs and whisked away immediately. And then the fines are ridiculous. So allegedly some information was obtained on the Clintons through their own malfeasance associated with security, allegedly all to keep all their emails separate from the great transparency of the United States, which to me is ridiculous. So he's talking about it, and he should have been talking about it. He gets up, he walks away. About 2 months later, that information gets leaked back to the Clinton campaign. It also gets pushed to the FBI in London. The FBI in London immediately opens up an investigation, and the Clinton campaign opens up through research. I can't remember the name of the research company. It doesn't matter. Fusion GPS.
Yeah.
Fusion GPS, they called them up and said, we want opposition.
There's a story about that.
Remember the guy? I do.
I know him well.
You can say his name because he was his wife.
His wife was the president or the contract holder that cooperated with the Department of Justice.
And this is the Fusion GPS
Yeah,
people?
yeah,
And this is a privately held company?
it is.
They do opposition research. So
So they're like, what's the one that get all the, not Turning Point, but the ones that get all the subpoenas from people? The Open Act.
Yeah, you can access it online. Yeah,
They go after all the freedom of information.
right. Very,
Go
very
ahead.
similar.
So as we're progressing here, so Fusion GPS goes through, and I'm not going to mention names, but pretty high profile people that become bigwigs in the Biden administration, but also were involved in the government back then.
Justice.
They decide that they're going to make up some information on the Steele dossier, which is part of the Fusion GPS. And the Steele dossier is from an informant or a spy that's hired by the FBI. And they go, yeah, here's all this information. And it had to do with some crazy stuff that Trump was compromised. Lewd acts in Russian hotels, information that was leaked to him from the servers of the Clintons. And I can't remember, was it Podesta? Was that her campaign manager?
Yes, it was.
His emails
Frank
were
Podesta.
hacked as well. So all that information allegedly was sent to Trump, and they said Trump is compromised by the Russian government. This is 100% completely false. Not 100%. There's some things, but none of this.
Trump is Trump.
Yeah, Trump is Trump. None of this stuff is true. So next thing you know,
and they know it's not true.
They know it's not true.
All right.
But here's what they do. And this is not over. Here's the fatal error of this. And then we're going to walk a little bit away from this because we're talking about Patel. So Patel is starting to uncover this as the investigation develops. Not right away, but later down the road when other things
what I was
happen.
getting
And
at.
Patel's like, holy fuck, I can't believe what's going on.
So he gets an inside peek of what the FBI is doing and what all of this.
He goes from working the intelligence side of Trump to Trump saying, listen, we need to investigate this. What is going on? What do they have? What are we doing as he's president? And why is all this stuff happening? But I think where the FBI makes a fatal mistake is Comey, who Jack spent a lot of time with.
I did.
He tells Trump, 2 days after he's elected, we're investigating this Russian collusion. Trump is fucking furious. He's overwhelmed. So initially they plant that seed, and then they go after Michael Flynn, and then they go after Carter. But how they go after Carter Page is they take the Fusion GPS information, and they say that Carter Page is acting with a foreign agent. So they go to
They get a FISA.
FISA court,
Yeah.
which Jack and I did tons of these when we worked at SOD. It's no different than writing, it's a little different. It's just like writing an affidavit to do a search warrant or anything of that nature.
You have to provide facts.
You have to provide facts that are
Probable cause.
verified. They have to be verified and tested, probable cause type facts. It's a little different on the foreign stage, but it's the same thing. Well, inadvertently, if you do foreign wires, you can intercept citizens, but those citizens are left masked, and you don't know who it is until Susan Rice unmasks them on national TV, another Obama appointee. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So they go, they get the FISA warrant, they go up. Now what do they have? They have a spy on the inside of his campaign, of his transition, the whole 9 yards. And then unfortunately, his attorney general immediately assigns a special counsel.
Jeff Sessions.
And this whole thing starts to blow up. Essentially, what really bothers me about this, and I have some very, very good diehard liberal friends of mine from Chicago, they talk about the Trump presidency chaos. The chaos was caused by this. And some bad decisions with Chris Christie running his transition campaign in the picks. But that's how it starts. So his number one, and it's all FBI driven, right? Remember Strzok,
Right.
McCabe, Comey,
The gal, there was a gal involved too. Yeah.
the other ones. So it's driven by those guys. Kash Patel was now picked, loyalist, go clean this up. How are they going to clean it up? They're going to unclassify as much of the information as they can. And remember when, and we'll get into that, the 51 guys who signed the thing that said the laptop was Russian disinformation. Well, what was the
Hunter
other
Biden laptop.
What was the other thing they did? And that comes into this play too. So what's the other thing they did? They went and they silenced all of social media. They said, this is not true. If you do this, then we're going to do whatever we do to you. So it was silenced, right? So what do we have now? We have Truth Social and we have X. So all these documents are going to be unclassified and they are going to be pumped all over free speech so that the rest of the world can see this and then go from there. So that's one. So that's Kash Patel, a very, very powerful person.
Smart,
a
very
brilliant
smart guy.
lawyer. And what's the number one thing he said? What do you do when you've got a big thorn in your side? You take the thorn out, you split it up, and you put it in different parts of the country. I think we're going to see the FBI
He's already made that statement.
move
That-
from downtown D.C. I think they're going to be split up into some of these central locations. Regional. And I think a lot of these people at certain levels, they might be in a little trouble. I mean, if you falsify documents and you do some of these things, not to mention, it's got to be close to treason. I know that's a big stretch, but you're trying to overthrow a president. So that's Kash Patel.
I think they're going to leave that part of it alone, but exposing all this would be, I mean, it'd be fun to listen to or fun to read.
Yeah, the truth will tell.
Right.
Yes, and I want to hear it.
You know, here's the other thing. It always cracks me up, and this reminds me of it. When somebody would say to us, all of us, well, how do you know that? Well, we had a wire. He's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. They told us. We didn't make this up. And that's essentially what they're dealing with
They
here.
are. Yeah, they're going to attack. They're going to attack that the
Integrity of the
information,
whole thing, yeah.
integrity of the investigation. It was not done. They cut corners. They didn't verify sources. They didn't check it. Now, this is the most powerful.
This is the FISA courts, right?
It's the most powerful agency in the world, law enforcement agency, the FBI. And some of these people at the higher levels, I can't say enough about FBI. They're amazing, and Jack and I love the intelligence community. But we're going to talk about a few bad apples today.
And this is another, I just throw this out as an example. I know Jim Comey, he's a very, very bright guy. But someone needs to explain to me, why did he go and say that Hillary Clinton was cleared of within days of the election? Why did he do that?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's not his position.
No.
That's a prosecutor's position.
It is, and some other things that they did while this is going on, they briefed the Clinton campaign, and they briefed the president, the vice president, the director of the CIA.
Whether it is what we think it is, how stupid could you be?
I agree.
You're leaving trail through the woods for a moron to follow you.
I think it's like when
Come
you're
on.
a kid and that lie goes, when you start to tell the lie and then it just starts to mushroom into
Yeah,
this
it's
thing.
going
I
around.
think we've made our point on that.
And then you're like, holy
let's,
shit.
Let's move
Duly
on to
noted,
these other.
Tommy.
Let's move on to a couple other.
All right, so-
Nominees. So let's get into some other picks, some other nominees, Joe. Why don't we go to Pam Bondi? Go to Pam Bondi.
All right. Well, here we go.
DOJ, right?
Here we go. DOJ. What do I think about Pam Bondi? One, I think she's a ferocious prosecutor. I think she's a loyalist to Donald Trump, and I think she's a fixer. She's been the fixer for a long time, and she's one of his closest allies, and it's no mistake that she is going to lead the DOJ. So we gave a little insight into Kash Patel, who I think those two are going to be partners. And I think Pam Bundy's number one task over
Bondi.
Bondi.
We don't need to get into
Bundy. So I think that what I love about her is, again, she was a loyalist. And guess what else she did? She was Trump's attorney on his first impeachment. So fantastic lady. So
And then also saw the corruption or the lying, whatever you want to call it, or the manipulation of information. Her and Kash Patel worked on that together too, correct?
Kash Patel worked more on the Russian dossier, but yes, he was an advisor on all of it.
But let's not sell her short. She's a two-time elected attorney general for the state of Florida.
Right.
She's a hell of a prosecutor.
Absolutely.
Hell of an attorney.
Absolutely.
And she means what she says. I had the opportunity to meet her several times, and I was so impressed with the way that she embraced law enforcement, especially even DEA at the time. So would I work for her? Yeah, I would love to.
I think that we got to go into a little bit more conspiracy theory, because
I love a good conspiracy
We're going to tie
theory.
it all together kind of towards the end.
Let's go, baby.
So here we go. We got Donald J. Trump. The very first months of his presidency, he is hit with the Russian dossier, the Steele dossier, the FISA courts, the spy in there, all that stuff. In the meantime, if you noticed, the FBI slow-walked all the investigations into the Clinton Foundation and in the server, the private server. Those were all slow-walked, and eventually they were dismissed. Now, you can look up who did it. I think his name's McCabe. But you can look up who did it, but they were dismissed. All right? So as they're dismissed, what's starting to brew? Well, as we go further down the line in the election process and the cycle, now we know that Donald J. Trump looks like he's going to be running against Joe Biden in the 2020 election. So as this develops, I believe it's the New York Post posts a article officially naming the Biden laptop. And the laptop associated with Hunter Biden, his dealings with Burisma since 2014, and the possible involvement of Jim and Joe Biden on that laptop. Now, we're going to get into this on the next pick that we talk about. But that laptop, then Trump That's their October surprise, right? Trump and Giuliani are like, I'm going to release this to the press, and I'm going to make this work. Well, the now Secretary of State, who's the Secretary of State?
Help me out.
Pompeo.
No. The Secretary of State is, why can't I think of this right now?
The Secretary of State now?
Oh,
Yeah.
the first guy.
Right now.
Oh, you're
Blinken. Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll have to get rid of all
I
that.
thought.
So it makes us look smart. So Mr. Blinken and Mr. Biden are talking while Biden's the vice president. Now, we're going to get back to Pam and why she was picked. They're talking when he was vice president, and they know that this laptop's going to hit, and there's going to be a debate, and Trump's going to ask about it. So Blinken calls his old buddy over at the CIA and says, hey, listen, I was thinking about trying to do something here. We got to come up with a talking point so that Mr. Biden's not
You talk about John Brennan.
Brennan, it's a contractor at the time.
Okay.
And I'll get to his name in just a second. So it starts with an M. So he talks to him.
That narrows it down.
It narrows it down.
We
He
get
gets
the
with
point.
him,
Let's
and
roll.
they come up with it's Russian disinformation, and they come up with the idea to have 51 former or current intelligence officials to sign off on that document. Now, we got to get into the document a little bit and why Pam is so important to Donald J. Trump. So, the document itself borders on violations of the Hatch Act because some of these guys are contractors, some of them are getting paid. But what you need to know about intelligence officials, it's a very big status to be a former intelligence official in the Beltway and to have your clearance and then to be called upon in meetings so that you can give your opinion on foreign intelligence or movements or whatever it is. It's extremely important to them, and it's like having a badge of honor.
Well, they keep their top clearance or their top
do.
secret clearances and all that.
And most of them get paid, and most of them come on as contractors, and some of their salaries are classified or whatever it may be. So these 51 officials, I say that because we're going to get to a possible lead into that. And then, boom, this Russian disinformation thing happens. He's kind of pissed, right, Trump? And I think he makes a fundamental error. And when he starts to talk to the Ukraine, he kind of massages it a little bit, and he's probably steps one or two things over the line, and it looks like he's withholding. Now, this is very sweet, isn't it? It's rich in the irony of how this is developed. He is withholding funds for the war so that they investigate Joe Biden and Hunter Biden on these issues associated with Burisma and this possible crime.
I don't think the war had started.
Yeah, it was military funding.
Yes,
so maybe it
defense,
hadn't started,
yes.
defense funding, it hadn't started yet.
Because that plays into this down the road.
It does. So what do? Vindman leaks the call, and they impeach him. Rich, with what we know now about the laptop, which we'll talk at the very end, rich what we know about the laptop, and rich on how they flipped that around and put it on Trump. It was a brilliant play politically, but I think Pam is going to realize that there were some laws broken when they did this. And unfortunately, I'd like to see what's going to happen. And again, what's going to happen is she's going to release, they're going to unclassify the documents, because that's what everybody does, right? So if you do something nefarious, you classify all the documents so nobody can read them.
Right.
And they're
like the JFK files?
You got it.
There you
You
go.
got it. But I won't
And
say
your hope is you die before they're released.
Right. So I think that's one of the things that's going to be exposed. So she's no friend of the DOJ, but Jack brought it up. She is an amazing prosecutor. She had a good tenure, and she's a great pick. And I think the DOJ is going to get dismantled as well. I think
When you say dismantled, there'll be a lot of changes.
I think when we say dismantled, we don't mean the great rank and file workers, even the high-ranking ones that don't engage in this political activity. If you're engaged in this swamp political activity, you should probably resign now, because I think you're going to get faced with either a transfer, some sort of downgrade.
Or the exposure of being involved in this.
And you got to
know, that's-
remember, what are we going to do with this stuff? We're going to put millions of documents out on Truth Social and X. Everyone can see what you did.
I think that's a really important part, because the ability to see things like emails, hard texts, has really never come up in politics like it has now.
Correct.
In the old days, those communications were internal and controlled. Now they're not. And consequently, the ability to go outside of that controlled via what Hillary Clinton did with her own server, they're exposed a lot more. So there's a sense, and I notice from talking to people at DOJ, there are people that were on the fringes of all of this, but had no idea that they were involved.
Correct.
They're now exposed.
Correct. They were actually, there's articles about when the interviews were happening and when the reports were going down and the investigations were happening, they were not shown intelligence that would have swayed them another way. And
Well, it's the old thing, need to know.
correct.
So if you're working on one thing, you don't need to know where this is going. We just want you to work on this. And that, unfortunately, is going to come back to bite all
I think
these
so.
people.
So she was the lawyer for Trump during that first impeachment. And I love the irony of where this stuff is going. And then at the end, we'll bring it in with, well, let's go to the next one. And then we'll tease
And I
that.
want to go to the CIA.
I do
is
too.
where I'd like to go.
Because I'd like to
And-
end it there, and then we've got some other things we
Well,
want
and
to
then
chat
the
about.
CIA is, again, it's vital organization to the safety of the United States.
Tommy, it is also so unreported. It is one of the most valuable political tools a president possesses because its budget is classified, its operations, for the most part, unless they blow up, are classified. So if you want to change the direction of a country, its reputation overseas, the CIA is the way to do it. And I think Trump didn't recognize that his first term. I guarantee you he knows that now.
And the nominee is John Ratcliffe.
John Ratcliffe.
What do we got on John Ratcliffe, Joe?
Okay, so once again, and I'll be brief because I could
No,
talk
you won't. But
I could
go
talk
ahead.
about Ratcliffe.
No, you won't, but go ahead.
So Ratcliffe was a Texas congressman, and he was on the Intelligence Committee. He eventually ran a National Intelligence Agency, or not one of the bigwigs under Trump. But
NSA.
he saw all this with the laptop.
All these investigations.
Saw
yeah,
it,
right, okay.
saw it, knew it was classified, couldn't say anything. And if you remember, there was Nunes documents and some other documents that came out. These guys tried to dance around it as we sat there. Remember Trump's thing, shifty shift?
Yeah.
Remember that? Shifty shift, shifty shift.
Pencil neck.
Yeah.
All the
He
great
was just
adjectives.
reelected, which, wow.
California, baby.
Wow. But Adam Schiff was the other side to Ratcliffe. They both see the same documents. They both see the same intelligence. Ratcliffe knows that everyone's lying. And he's got to shut up. He can't. And in the meantime, they're destroying Giuliani. Right? And I know Giuliani went a little south there for a bit, but Schiff sat there and got on news stations, the TV, and told the American people that there was evidence there, not only about the collusion, but about what he did with the Ukrainians. And then completely deny all this stuff about the laptop. So Ratcliffe gets in, gets the laptop. What happens to the laptop, right? The laptop is evidence. It's been authenticated. The emails are being released, which show collusion between Hunter Biden, the Ukrainians, and Joe Biden's knowledge. Got to have knowledge and intent.
If you don't have knowledge, then why do you pardon it? Pardon your.
There you go.
Come on.
And I think you're going to see a pardon of Jim Biden as well, and then maybe even his daughter, because she's money funneled through some of her companies as well. So you may see that. But what Ratcliffe did is Ratcliffe loves the intelligence community, as we do. The intelligence community is essential. You cannot have a country. Just look what Israel did to its enemy on intelligence with pagers and cell phones and radios and, oh my goodness. You cannot have a country that works in the world that we work in with all the different stuff that we have going on if you don't have an amazing intelligence unit. And I think we do.
Best
I
in
know
the world.
we do.
Best
I
in
do.
the world.
I do. I agree. And I think they're going to get slapped But here's what I would like to see, and I'm not even going to say that.
When you say, let me interrupt you real quick. When you say slapped, when you say they're going to get slapped,
These
what you're getting at, I think, is the fact that a lot of the stuff you're saying, you're going to see, or a lot of the stuff that we're saying that happened with the Russian collusion and the Burisma and all that, you're going to see some people maybe not go to jail, but they're going to get exposed.
They're going to become insignificant.
Right.
And that's a fate worse than death when you're a Beltway bureaucrat.
Is becoming insignificant.
Insignificant. So imagine that if I was Ratcliffe, if anybody wants to nominate me to the director of the CIA, I would love that position. But the first thing I would do is I would start an investigation. I would interview all 51 of the people that signed that letter, which influenced an election, which the contractors may be a violation of the Hatch Act. If you don't know what the Hatch Act is, KGP used to talk about it all the time. I believe it's 1939. Anybody in the executive branch, except for the president and the vice president, have to remove themselves from politics. They cannot do public things like the president and vice president. So,
or do anything to sway an election.
especially use your power and influence. So what I would do is I would do an investigation and I would take away their power and influence. I would make sure that they lose their security clearances, that they go away, and they're never asked again. And I think that's a fate worse than death.
Actually,
I'll just tell you right now. November 4th, when Trump was elected, all of those people have voluntarily gone away because they know it's coming.
It's coming. It's coming. So that's why I like those three picks.
Yeah.
And obviously, Jack and I tried to stay with.
in those three picks, what you painted there was
Four.
a picture of united
Oh,
front
it's loyal.
to
Yeah.
to attack what he's won. He ran in 2016 about draining the swamp. He had no idea what he was getting into in
Right.
2016.
He didn't know what the swamp was.
But you can't just, and we can't have, and this is what we want to finish up on, and now I'm going to pitch this to Jack. You can't just have somebody come in and crush everybody. You have to have a mission focus. So what do you think after some of this crap goes away and these agencies can operate full steam ahead? What do you think they're going to look like in a year or two?
I think that's the most pivotal question we talked about today, and it's the one I think that's going to affect everybody. Let's start with DEA. As I see DEA, the way it sits, and its leadership is still undetermined, but my view would be reduce our foreign footprint in non-productive countries. So we're in 60 countries. I could, off the top of my head, probably take our people, their family, out of harm's way maybe in 20 to 30. I would make that more regional, where we would be able to be fluid should the threat come in a place we don't have local representation. On the domestic side with DEA, I think we're going to see our ability to move where the threat is. And the threat is obviously right now to bolster the southwest border, but I agree with Joe, we're not doing enough on the northern border. I think we have to get more engaged in that. I think that's one of the things President Trump has already told Trudeau. You got to tighten your ass up there,
Right.
Otherwise we will.
Well, and you guys brought that up in the when we talked about the borders.
Yes.
Is that the northern border is the easiest way to get in, correct?
Yes.
It's the scary ones that get in. I think.
So
It's traditionally been the espionage tunnel into the United States. Now, that's not to say there's not trafficking or human trafficking, drug trafficking, guns, and all those other things. But it is, for me, it was always impossible to deal with because we just did not have assets in that area, and we were relying so much on the Canadians, which, quite frankly, they're great people, but they don't look at things the way we do in terms of law enforcement. So I think you'd see that. I'm hoping that we would be more regional. I'm hoping that we would set up 4 distinct regions throughout the country, and that the police chief in St. Louis, if he had issues with the local DEA office, would call the guy sitting in Chicago, for instance. I don't know where they'd put him. But that we would have more of those regional threats addressed quickly than having to go through Washington. And that we would be as fluid as the threat is. And that's going to take money. It's going to take resources. DEA traditionally has been as lean a federal agency as there is. Unlike the FBI, which is bloated to their pants are going to explode. That doesn't mean I don't like
You're not
them.
beefing with them. You're just pointing out a fact.
I'm just pointing that it's just the way it is, and I've been through the budget hearings, and I understand. So I think that would be the regional point. And if I'm the president and advising the president, I would say that would be our direction for the next year, and live with those consequences. But there's no reason why we need 2,000 DEA agents in and around the Washington, D.C. area when I couldn't fund the office in El Paso that we're under fire on every night. So we got to fix that, but money fixes that.
Do you think that's with every agency? Do you think you're kind of making a footprint
I do,
that
Tom.
each agency's about that it would work for each agency?
And that goes back to my initial mention of the Beltway.
Yeah.
As if it's the only important part. No, the important part is St. Louis, Kansas City, Chicago, where people have to live with the street crime, with the organization. It goes to the domestic cartel program, which is a must, in my opinion, to link those organizations to larger scale overseas organizations so we can take them out and have them face all the sanctions that we can do overseas that we're not necessarily doing now. I think the other side of it, and this is really important, is the 92, I believe there's 92 U.S. attorneys across the country have to be on the same page. And they have to get the same marching orders as the agencies get, because traditionally it has not been that way. DEA's telling us we got to do this, this, and this, and then the U.S. attorney says, well, I'm listening to the local mayor here and the state senator, and they're telling me, nah, here's the plan, here's the blueprint, we're going into Sunday's game against the Chicago Bears, and these are the plays we're going to run.
Yeah.
And I think we have to do that. That will trickle down to the local agencies because they want to be, again, relationships, coalitions. They want to be part of the solution, not the outliers. That's the way I see it. The FBI is far too bloated internally. It's a culture unto its own, and it has to be tweaked. Certainly doesn't need to be blown up. They do some of the most important work in the world, and I respect the hell out of them. But I've also fought for resources, and they always win.
I believe and we talked about the loyalty that they have to Trump. So that central message, I couldn't agree with Jack any more than that. But by hiring the loyalty and the people that are in the same mission focus, that's
Right.
how you get that central message.
That's what the military has done.
Yep.
You don't get to be a general if you have a conflicting point of view with your hierarchy.
Right.
Eisenhower didn't get the job in World War II because he was fighting with everyone else. No. Here's your orders, go to work.
I see the exact same thing, and I see a fundamental shift.
And I see it being very fun for those on the lower aspect
I
of it.
think so.
You know, it's neat that you get promoted and all that, but for the agents and the coppers on the street and, even the supervisors, because they're going to have, a lot of input, take us back in our group. If they put us in something like that, we would have fun as could be.
But let's take a little bit of caution. We got to get a lot of these people out.
Yeah.
There are some really inexperienced people in positions they have no business being in. There is a reluctance, at least I know in the part of DEA, about transferring people, even though every agent, when he does this, signs a mobility agreement. If I need you, you're going. And if you don't want to go, you don't have a job.
Right.
We've got to get back to that. We've gotten away with it. The softer, friendlier Joe Biden, you'll be fine. Everything's fine. You can't do it. The criminal, I remember seeing something that drove me crazy. Every day, our agents don't try to keep the proficiency up with firearms and physical fitness. There's a bad guy in prison lifting weights.
You're right.
Right.
Getting ready to come out and kick your ass. And that's the mentality I think we got to get back to if we want to make a difference.
No, and I think one of the things that I saw when I was in DEA, and it's just coming from an outsider, is that you guys would send every group supervisor to DEA to Washington at one point, whether they wanted to be an ASAC or not. And I can understand the fact if you want to move up and you want to be an executive level supervisor, yeah, you're going to have to get there sooner or later and get that experience. But there was a lot of guys that didn't even want, that had no aspirations,
And they were very good at what they did.
and they already had the local
Connections?
connections, and they would move them to Washington for no particular reason other than the fact that that's the way it was done.
Yeah.
And somebody came up with that somewhere along the way. They just kept on doing it and kept on doing it.
No, I agree.
Well, and then not only was it silly, it cost a shitload of money to move people.
Right.
And then to move them back out when they didn't want to stay.
Here's another thing I'll bring up. So I'm 57 years old. I got 30 years experience in
Not
DEA.
now, it's not 57.
No, I'm
He's
actually
going back to that day.
I'm actually younger. But I got 30 years experience with DEA. I've been transferred 13 times.
Yeah.
I know the country. Now I'm sitting as a deputy administrator. I know Washington. I know the senators. I know the other agency heads. And I got to leave when I turn 60 because I'm
that's the way it's supposed
because
to be.
I'm a career guy. And even my wife said, "Why would they do that?"
Yeah.
Well, the answer I'd get is, well, they don't want you chasing a guy down the street because you're 60 years old. Well, first of all, I could kick some ass, but that's why they give you a car. You run them over.
Yeah.
But the point is, the expertise is out the door for ludicrous
Yeah, it's a bad rule.
policies.
So we touch on two things, right? That's the first rule's bad, the second rule's bad for different reasons. And we talked about it the other day when we were trying to put some stuff together. I moved a couple times. I didn't move 7. But I actually had great assignments. I had great people I worked for, so it bettered my
Yeah,
career.
that's a
Now,
good thing.
if you want to stay where you're at and you're good, you should be able to stay where you're at. But Jack brought up the mobility thing, right? If you suck and you don't do it,
You're out.
Hey, you're going to Texas,
Yeah.
you're going here, you're going there. They can't be. You can't have it both ways.
Do you know how many lawsuits were brought against me that I think they're all done now?
Jeez.
It was because a guy was sitting in a position of authority. Nobody was doing anything, and I said, "Come, it's time for you to go. You had your shot. Let's put someone else in there." "Oh no, you can't do that." And then of course the attorneys would say, "You signed this agreement."
Yeah.
Well, that was in 19.
Doesn't matter.
When
And I can see people asking, well, if they didn't do anything in St. Louis, why would they do anything in McAllen, Texas? Well, you get sent to McAllen or one of those border cities, you sit at your desk long enough, that phone's going to ring
Yeah.
and say, go get 74
But you
kilos
want
just
an
came across the country.
You want an administrator that's had a flavor from a lot of different places.
Absolutely.
Like we have a lot of guys.
Those are the
that-
best leaders.
We have a
That's-
lot of guys that stay on the East Coast. Well, the East Coast runs it a little different. A lot of guys from New York go between New York, Washington, back to New York, back to Washington, back to New York. Maybe an overseas stint. If you have a supervisor, a deputy administrator that's been at the border, that's been in Albuquerque, New Mexico, that's been in Chicago, that's been in St. Louis, that's been in D.C., that's been in the intelligence side, you're completely asinine to get rid of that experience at 60.
Right.
That makes no sense.
Right.
But the government jumps over dollars to save nickels. That needs to change.
Well, they would say you're at your highest earning potential, so you need to go because we can get a couple of these 3 brand new guys, and
I don't understand that part.
No.
I think this Ramaswamy, Elon Musk thing coming. They're going to look at some
Well,
of this stuff.
and you guys both know, and as these private contractors, as you leave the Beltway, you don't leave the Beltway, you stay in the Beltway, and there's these consulting groups,
Right.
and there's all these people that have made these relationships within the Beltway. I'll save the swamp but they get in those relationships,
it.
and then when they leave, they get hired back as this silly money gets filtered down for bullshit.
Yeah. No,
And they'll hire these other groups to be consultings, and it's almost like money laundering.
and sometimes those, Tommy, sometimes those consultants can go opposite of what the administration wants to do.
That's what I was going
And
to say.
that is a scary. You talk about avenues for blackmail. You talk about avenues for subversion. You talk about political espionage. That is a open door.
I thought some of those contractors you're talking about wielded too much power back at our old place.
Yeah.
I thought that some of them, you're gone, you're a contractor, but they still controlled some of the purse strings.
And
so
a
to
lot,
speak.
and a lot of
Or-
them were shit employees.
Yeah, I didn't like that part in the Beltway.
No.
So, Joe, you found out what's the M name?
Oh, I
What's the M name
apologize.
stand for?
I get all excited and we get
Right.
down to some cool stuff. So
Right, that's
Anthony Blinken went to the old acting CIA director. His name was Michael Morrell, but he was a contractor at the time to discuss.
You got one of them jobs that we just talked
You're
about.
damn right.
Well, see,
To
they
dis-
need to get rid of that. They're right on that.
To discuss the 51.
Because I know that's been discussed in the
Intelligence
defense world, in the DOD. These guys that are going,
Yes.
retired generals that go work for ballistic companies and tank making companies. And
Well, I think it's important to have that type of experience. We talked about that, but there's so many that are in the political realm of it,
Yeah.
and they're maybe patronage.
like I said,
jobs.
some people think of it as a patronage job. Some people think of it as money laundering, which I'd like to call it. But
So if you guys don't mind, what I would like to do is I have a question that's burning inside of me.
go ahead, baby.
From the lowest, I don't want to say the lowest levels, from street level type stuff to the international type stuff about some of these cartels. And I'd like your perspective from St. Louis City, and you think if there's any trickle down effect. And then Jack, I would obviously like yours from something a little bit on a grander scale. But we know that Donald Trump has talked about our north and southern border. And I'm not talking about the trade, I'm not talking about any of that. He has pretty much said fentanyl is destroying our country. You're either going to stop it at your end or I'm going to put a 25% tariff on every good that you have come in here. I believe that it's about $400 billion for Canada and pretty close to $400 or $500 billion for Mexico as well. So 25% of that would be tacked onto them. What do you think that would do? Would you think that would ever trickle down? Do you think it'll stop the flow of fentanyl coming to the United States, help? And then what do you think it would look at as political leaders attacking each other like that?
I'm just going from a common sense view. I don't know. I don't have any insight. But it appears to me that Trump has portrayed himself as somebody that will go through with any threat or any policy that he says he's going to do. So if he says he's going to tear up somebody, he will. But he's also the kind of guy that is willing to not do it if you play the game he wants to play, or you agree to stop fentanyl, stop whatever it is that he's saying that this is what's killing the United States. We need you to stop that or curtail it or something. I think he's willing to, you look at his book, The Art of the Deal. I think he's willing to put himself in a position of power to use that and do it. If you do not come to play game, if you do not come to the negotiation table, he will do what he says. But if you come to the negotiation table with the plan that he agrees with, he will then back off. That's just my opinion. Jack, what do you got?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it there. I think this is, you could separate it. It's politics, and I think to do anything we can to stop fentanyl is crucial. And I think he gets that. And I thought he got that the first time, his first term. But what we can't leave that out there by itself. We're going to have to at some point really make a move internationally to stop these criminal organizations one way or the other. And it's difficult. You're operating in a foreign country. It's a sovereign country. It has, tremendous trade achievements with the United States. And he's a businessman. He knows that. But there is something to making a hit, to striking, and letting them know, both the host country and the bad organizations, the bad guys know that we're not going away. And I think the quicker we do it, because like everybody, there are already people saying, okay, we got 4 years to get rid of this guy. Maybe 2 years if the midterms go bad. But I think we got to hit him right away, and we got to show that we're ready to do it. And here's what I would advise. Keep your mouth shut. Don't have mad dogs going on TV saying we're going to come and do this. Just do it. Don't talk about it. Don't get in a verbal battle with a liberal or someone in the middle. Just do it. That says enough.
Do you think, and it's my last question, because I pondered this one and I want answers from you guys. Do you think, or what do you think? We know the border is going to be closed. We know we're trying to do tariffs for the fentanyl. I'm not talking about the other tariffs. I'm talking about if you don't stop smuggling, blah, blah, blah. What do you think the cartel response is going to be, and how do you think they're going to change?
This is something I don't know that we've talked about, but I've thought about it a long time. This is a geopolitical problem. And here's my concern. And this is one of the reasons why we came up with the domestic cartel program. If we exert pressure on the command and control of these cartels in foreign countries, we literally have surrogates of those organizations embedded in virtually every community across the country. There is a possibility, if we hit them hard, we could have some blowback within the United States from these people that are implanted. And I think that's exactly why the process of the domestic cartel program and our naming them foreign terrorist organization has to really be melted, because it would literally be like proxies of a criminal organization who are now at loose without command and control, without business incentives in terms of making money, knowing full well they're here illegally and they've committed criminal acts. What's going to stop them from doing more when they're trying to be apprehended? So this has to be coordinated.
From a local level, so at a local level, the biggest, I guess, federal change that'll come is your United States Attorney, which we talked about earlier, and what they're going to aggressively prosecute. And I think if you see them going in and aggressively prosecuting and investigating fentanyl cases at a local level, and these people start getting tied into cartels and getting charged differently, and they start seeing that on the streets, and word travels quick in all these cities.
And in prisons.
And the word travels quick. And if you say, hey, man, you start dealing that heroin, it doesn't matter if you knew there was fentanyl in it or not. They're coming at you, and you're going to get life, and you're going to get, even if you didn't kill anybody, but your heroin that you were dealing had a certain amount of fentanyl in it, you get a stiffer sentence. And then I think that's where you're going to see the blowback, right? Because there's going to be a lot of local people going to jail and getting a lot of time for something that people would say, well, it's not that big of a deal to deal drugs. There was no victim on this one.
Yeah, we saw it in the crack epidemic.
So, and then people die, and then it's not just the people that die. It's sometimes you might not get the bad dose, but the people that do get the bad dose, they deal it anyway. It's not like they're like, oh, man, there's a bad dose.
They have no idea what they're selling.
Well, and then, I think you'll see a difference on a local level of prosecuting these drug crimes in concert with fighting the cartels. That's where I think the biggest change is going to be locally.
Just to add to that, and then I'll dummy up. So whatever level of political influence you think are involved, I don't care if you're Democratic, Republican, or independent, what you just said does one thing. It secures this country. It makes our communities safer. So if you're not going to cooperate with the administration because you don't believe in you're not doing anything to cooperate to make your communities safer. So put that aside on this issue, because 200 people a day are dying from this scourge, and it's been happening now for 10 years. Yeah. So let's wake up, for Christ's sake.
All right, I got the last question on this. Both you people are from Chicago. You guys got a wonderful mayor. You guys got a wonderful mayor down there that is just making things run smooth. And we do make fun of him a little bit in our regular podcast. He blamed a lot of the violence that goes on Richard Nixon. I don't know if you knew that.
I did read that.
Yeah, he blamed that shit on Tricky Dick. And
well, Tricky Dick was into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, he was.
But he also recently is now under fire, and from all angles with this illegal immigration. And you guys still got people in Chicago. Give me something, Joe. What are your people in Chicago saying?
The one thing that I find amazing is how the citizens have revolted, how they they revolted. They vehemently attack him at town meetings. And they want what's good for their community. They don't want to spend $300, $400 million a year on people that shouldn't be here to begin with. And I think that's what's great about our political system, and that's what's great about elections. They do have consequences, which we talked about, and a lot of people voted for him. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole conspiracy theory about the teachers union and all the money that they may or may not have gotten from, that type of stuff out of Washington. But the final thing I'll say, and Jack and I talked a little bit about this, and he's got a different perspective because he was the big boss up there. When was the last time 50 aldermen ever voted the right way when they voted against his tax increase?
Has never happened. Ever.
50 aldermen in Chicago agreed with each other?
Yeah. Ever.
Well, he united. At least he said he was
50
going to unite.
against
He
them,
united
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Too bad it took an illegal immigrant crisis to unite everybody.
What scares me, my hometown is the best big city in the world. What can I say?
We'll keep making fun of him for you.
I mean, the guy's a boob.
And you can't
Yes,
get rid
he
of him,
is.
right? There's no law. There's no recall. They would have to create the law for the recall. So they're stuck with him for 2 more
I like
years.
the way when he's getting railed, he turns it back on the people like
Yes.
they're dummies.
It's their fault.
You're
It's
a
their
dummy. You
fault.
don't know what you're talking about. Blah blah blah. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap this up. And this was I find you guys fascinating to talk to just as we're sitting at the bar. But
At least somebody does.
but the insight is great. We're gonna do some more stuff like this. And Jack, I hope the transition team continues their open dialogue with you because I think you got some great ideas.
Well, I will tell you, Tommy, and I give you my word, if I'm selected, then you guys will have the office next to me, and every week we'll be doing.
We'll do our
we'll be
podcast
doing
from
a
your
podcast
office.
from Washington.
Yeah, there you go. We do federal files from the big good window. You got a good window? You get that job?
Oh my
Beautiful.
God,
See
it
the
was
White House.
gorgeous.
Oh, come on now.
Gorgeous. He had 2 sides. It was just absolutely.
But doesn't he get a better one because he gets a step up if he gets the
Oh,
job?
that was a damn good office.
All right, we'll keep that office then.
I like the other one had a shower.
All right, and then now
Had a
instead
bathroom.
of just we used to just talk on the phone when you went to Washington. I'll have to come see you.
Oh,
I never came and saw you when
We'll
you were in
send a
Washington.
DEA aircraft to pick you guys up.
Just don't tell Vivek.
Right, yeah.
That's exactly what it's not.
Right, don't let Elon know.
Don't let
That's
Musk or
exactly
Vivek
why it's
know.
not going to happen.
No, but another great show, you guys, and Joe and I and Jack have been talking about what we're going to do. We've given a lot of and Jack and Joe have just a tremendous insight, but now we're going to start doing some cases that we've all been involved in over the year and have friends that have been involved in great cases, and look forward to that. And we've been talking a little bit about doing a little bit more, but we'll see how that goes. Jack's in the middle of some conversations that might take him off the show. No, it won't. We can still call in.
I'm never going anywhere, Tom. You're stuck with this
All right,
bug.
brother. All right. Peace out until next month.
Thank you.
Take care.